Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K,
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur.
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Stanley pour les Canadiens, le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs!
And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida Tibi. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast on this Thursday, September 19. Thanks, everyone, for watching on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. Hope you will enjoy the podcast as much as Ivan Demidov enjoyed playing versus Sochi. 2 goals and 2 assists earlier today for Demidov, the second of which came in an empty net, making now 6 points in 6 games for Demidov. He is a point-per-game player in the KHL. Much to the delight of everyone, to the point where I read some tweets earlier today from people thanking Celine Dion for picking Demidov. Well, she did actually name out his name, but obviously this has Nick Bobrov written all over it because, of course, his dad works for SKA, and he is very, very high on Demidov, and so are the rest of the Montreal Canadiens scouts management team and obviously coach, and he was their pick, and everyone is pretty much happy. The only problem is he still won't be in Montreal for another year. Then again, if the Canadiens make the playoffs this year, who knows, right? Who knows? There was an intra-squad game earlier at Montreal Canadiens Pro Camp. We have an idea of the lines, or at least the lines for today, which say a lot to me. And the Montreal Canadiens announced earlier this morning that Kaiden Guhle was operated for an appendicitis, and his status will be evaluated again in 1 week from now. Without further ado, let's bring him in from TSN, their hockey analyst and director of scouting, Craig Button. Craig, how are you?
I'm great, Tony. How are you?
Very, very good. You know, the Canadiens have been a very injury-plagued team over the last several years, actually even breaking NHL records. And when Kaiden Guhle, when it was announced earlier this morning that he was operated for appendicitis, and when Kirby Dach took a stick of the face earlier today at practice and had to go off for a bit, some Canadiens fans were probably saying, here we go again. But the good news is it's better that it happens now than it happens when the season starts on the 9th of October, right?
Yeah, there's no question. And I think, a number of those injuries were to players that played, really important roles and positions for the Montreal Canadiens. Kirby Dach being one of them. I mean, he goes out early in the season. You lose that type of talent, and it just puts stresses on your lineup. And certainly we saw the Canadiens, struggle offensively. And, now with a healthy Kirby Dach, Patrick Laine coming in, Slafkovsky finding his way, you can withstand those injuries. Are going to be part of it, but you can withstand it a lot better now with the depth that the Montreal Canadiens have. And certainly Kaiden Guhle, chomping at the bit to get on the ice, has the appendicitis, but he'll be back in pretty quick order. And good news on Kirby Dach. When I always hear about a player of Kirby Dach's height get high stick or get a stick was it a stick?
Yeah,
like somebody really had to get their stick up high.
yeah, for sure. He's a tall glass of water, isn't he, at 6'4"? Craig, you know what, a lot of people were wondering who that 6 forward was going to be in the top 6, and we won't know who it is for when the season opens up on the 9th of October. What we do know is we know who it was today. And much to the delight, I would imagine, of Alex Newhook, it was he. So the lines at practice today, as expected, Suzuki in between Caulfield and Slafkovsky. They were together last year. Kirby Dach centering Patrick Laine and Alex Newhook. Christian Dvorak with Josh Anderson and Joshua Roy and Jake Evans with Armia and Gallagher. Everyone's had an opinion on this, but when you look at these lines, I guess a lot of logic prevails here today. Marty St. Louis probably sees it as the same way as most Canadiens fans see it. Sometimes you're not supposed to read things into lines at pro camp. We know that the Canadiens have less players at their pro camp this year than they have had in quite some time. They want to get right down to business right away. And I would imagine that probably the same thing should be said for their lines. I'd be willing to bet that if everyone's healthy, these are the lines that will open up the season in October versus the Leafs.
So let me pose this question to you and to all the viewers. If that's how the season started for the Montreal Canadiens with respect to their forward lines formation, is there anything negative about any of it?
No.
And that's exactly how I feel. And so we look at how it starts, and in previous conversations we've had, Tony, every coach wants flexibility with their lineup, and with not only the acquisition of certain players, but the health of other players, the progression of other players. Now Marty St. Louis has a lot of flexibility within his lineup. Within game to game, everything that you can look at to try to give your team every advantage to be the best you can be. And players aren't scaled. Like when I look at that lineup, I don't see anybody scaled up the lineup too high. I think that Joshua Watt, it'll be interesting to watch him play. He showed himself very well in his 20 some odd games last year, and I think that he's ready to. But he doesn't have to be in a top two line role. He can play on the third line, settle in there. Alex Newhook showed very well with the Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche in 2022, playing left wing and contributing. And you have the two big guys in Doc and Line playing in there. I think there's some really good offensive depth behind Slafkovsky, Suzuki, and Caulfield. And there's some real good backing. Josh Anderson playing on a third line, his size, his ability to be a catalyst with his skating and, be disruptive. And if Christian Dvorak can be healthy, I think as a third line center, it's a nice fit. And then you go to the fourth line. It's how you want to be. You want to be balanced and you want to have some flexibility for the coach. And I think these line formations represent that.
Yesterday, Marty St. Louis spoke to members of the media. And in French, Marty's got a line that he uses very often. It's il faut pas juste jouer ta game, il faut jouer la game, puis il faut amener ta game dans la game. And basically, translation is, it's not about playing your game, it's about playing the game, but you have to find a way to take your game into the game, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And, so he talked about that, and then he gave Cole Caulfield an example. And St. Louis, says, look, it's a couple of years that he's been working with a lot of these players, and he's trying to create hockey players. And basically, he talked about Cole Caulfield, and without saying it, he basically said that his goal was to make Cole Caulfield a more complete hockey player. He talked about Caulfield being a perimeter player and a guy who can score goals. But he worked with him, and he said, Caulfield was criticized by some because his goals per game average went down compared to the year before. So a lot of people thought, well, in that respect, he had a bad season. But he said he didn't have a bad season. He says because Cole Caulfield was no longer a player who played on the perimeter. Cole Caulfield was a player who could play physical at times, who could be on the forecheck at times, who can create turnovers at times, who played 200 feet, who could be just as good defensively as he was offensively, who no longer is the type of player that you put on just when you need a goal, but now the type of player that you can put on even when you're up by a goal. And so it's all about creating complete hockey players. And Marty St. Louis says that that's his mission.
Well, I think that every player wants to be as complete a player as possible. You don't want to be in what I would call just a singular specialist. I think you want to find a way to round out your game so that you can be relied upon and counted upon to be a player that can find different ways to be productive. I was amazed last year hearing the criticisms of Cole Caulfield because I thought Cole Caulfield's game, excuse me,
That's okay.
rounded out tremendously well. I thought he became a more complete player. I thought that his passing skills, he's always been a highly intelligent player. His passing skills were more on display last year. But keep this in mind, Tony. His shooting percentage went down last year. He was top 10 last year in shots on goal, and slot shots on goal. He was really good. So that type of a goal scorer is going to score because he's getting those. It's not like he stopped shooting the puck or they were less dangerous shots. The bottom line is Cole Caulfield was still a dangerous player, but the shooting percentage went down, and we see some flux in those different areas at different times. I always say this about goal scorers. I become really concerned when you're not getting the chances.
Yeah,
Cole Caulfield was getting the chances last year. And if you're going to be worried about Cole Caulfield, you're going to be worried about if the sun's going to rise in the east and set in the west.
Yeah, I had a great conversation, I thought, earlier today with Denis Gauthier, former NHLer who, of course, works for RDS, whose son, Ethan, as you know, is a draft pick of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And Denny took a couple of days off last week to actually go watch his son play in a rookie showcase that took place in Nashville. And Denny brought up the name when we were talking about this very same topic on my radio show, Le Forum, weekdays between 10 and noon on 91.9 FM in Montreal. If I give it a plug, I just did. Denny brought up the name Rob Schremp. And, Rob Schremp picked up, as you would know, Craig, 145 points in his last season of junior hockey with the London Knights. He ended up being a 25th pick overall in the 2004 entry draft. And yes, Rob Schremp wasn't a big guy. I think he was a 5'10" centerman or something like that. He was rather lightweight compared to most NHLers. But then he said, Rob Schremp had a lot of talent, like more talent than a lot of players that played in the National Hockey League. But when all was said and done, he played like 114 games in the National Hockey League, couldn't hold on to a job, and ended up playing in various other leagues, like in Sweden, like in the KHL, like in Switzerland, like in Germany, and the rest goes on and on. But why did he have that short career? Because unfortunately, he had not become a complete hockey player that Marty St. Louis is talking about, right? And it's, I don't know if this was the exact case for Rob Schremp, but I think he's trying to, like, if a coach thinks that you can provide, a point production per game, but actually think that when you're on the ice, you're going to end up being on the ice for 2 goals against per game, you're going to have a hard time being in the lineup more often than not, right?
Oh, well, I'm dying to meet this coach because I've heard about this coach. And remember, I'm using this coach. I'm dying to meet this coach that won't play the players that will help him win. I'm dying to meet him. I've yet in all my years been able to meet this coach that won't play the players that will help him win.
But it's once again, it's just not about production though, right? Because there's coaches, there's players that can score goals, but if the coach deems that the player is going to be on the ice for more goals against that he's going to score, ultimately he's not going to help him win.
Well, that's exactly right. And then if you start off and you're going to put the team in a hole and you're going to, dig a hole for your team. And then now you need me to get you out of the hole. Like that doesn't help a team. Like when you start chasing games, teams that chase games are rarely successful. And I'm not talking about in a season. I'm talking within that game, so, this is just a simple fact. And whatever it means or not, it is fact. The team that scores first wins 2 out of every 3 games. That's just a fact. Now, we can go why the reasons are, and we can go what happens when a team goes up 2-0 or whatever. We talk about the team that scores first wins 2 out of every 3 games. No, rarely in the history of the NHL has there been a winning percentage that good. So, again, the reason I bring up that just little fact is that you don't want to start chasing a game. And certainly if you as a player are going to be what I would call a liability, well, you have to establish that your play can earn the trust of the coach. And again, when I say about this coach, I'm dying to meet him or her that will play the players that won't play the players that will help you win. You know, there's a big difference too. And and Denny Gauthier, who I absolutely love and adore as a person. And you think about Denny. Denny was a first-round draft pick. Denny knew what his game was. Denny knew that he was going to be hard defensively. He was going to be physical. He would deliver body checks. And you knew exactly what you were getting. Denny Gauthier didn't try to be something he wasn't. And it was a real good, solid player for a lot of years in the NHL. You know, you bring up Robbie Schremp. Like, I have seen so many players that possessed high-end skills. You have to connect those skills to the team. Oh, isn't it interesting how we've come back to Marty St. Louis, mantra? We've come right back to it. Josh Ho-Sang was no different. If you went and watched the practice, and they're just two players. If you went and watched the practice, you go, wow, look at him dangle, look at him skate, look at him handle the puck. And then when the game started, they couldn't do it because they couldn't connect to the game. And that's what Marty St. Louis is talking about. They didn't fail because they lacked skill. They weren't able to have staying power in the NHL because they couldn't connect their skills to the game. Simple as that.
The Sick Podcast brought to you in part by several sponsors, one of which is Playground. Looking for the ultimate entertainment experience? Playground is all gaming, poker, fine dining, live music, DJs, all with unmatched customer service. Why go anywhere else? They're just minutes from downtown Montreal, across the Mercier Bridge. Playground, your top destination for fun. As a matter of fact, I was there yesterday, late afternoon, with the family, and always a lot of fun. I could tell you that right now. All right, okay. So they had an intra squad today, and let's talk about Oliver Kapanen, who scored 2 goals, and every now and then, it just so happens that there's a camp where there's one guy that not too many people are talking about, and then all of a sudden, he comes in and surprises everyone by making the team. And because Oliver Kapanen has, of course, been playing, in Sweden, in Finland, over the past couple of years, he's not a guy that has been talked about much, right? Because he hasn't been here in North America. Put up a pretty good season last year with 34 points in 51 games, a great playoff with 14 points in 13 games. Not too shabby of a world championship in 2023 with 3 points in 5 games. Talk about trying to get someone's attention, scoring 2 goals in your first intra squad there with the pros this year. That's a pretty good start.
It is. And you talk about the maturity of a player. So Oliver's had the opportunity to let his game grow, to let it develop, in a very challenging league. And then he becomes an important player on his team. He becomes a good player at the World Championships. Having watched Oliver for a number of years, and certainly I don't think that there was any surprise where Montreal drafted him. Either way, whether people said, oh, he went later than he thought or he went earlier, I think he was a player. It was interesting, and I don't know exactly when it was, but one of your collaborators, Grant McKaig, had mentioned, and it might have been at the World Championships, that Oliver Kapanen has a chance to be a really good NHL player. And you're watching, you can't watch all the players. You're trying to, make sure that you're on top of the players. But it's those types of comments that you say, it's got my attention. I better watch a little bit closer. I better pay a little bit more attention to Oliver Kapanen because, you get alerted. It's like the alerts that come on your phone. Hey, Oliver Kapanen, his progression has been really significant. And you watch him, and having the background of having watched him play for a number of years, it became pretty obvious that his game had become much more rounded. It had become much more impactful. And you watch a player just gain that confidence that when he goes out on the ice, it's like, I'm not happy to be out on the ice. Just, oh boy, I got a chance. I don't want to, he went out on the ice with the idea that I'm going to make a difference here. I'm going to make an impact. And I think that that's really grown in Oliver's game. It happened in the league. It happened in the playoffs. It happened in the World Championships. And I think he arrives at the Montreal Canadiens training camp with an enormous amount of confidence that says, hey, listen, I can play. He's played against NHL players at the World Championships. Now he comes over with real confidence, and that's a real. I mean, we talk about the Slafkovsky. We talk about Slafkovsky, Caulfield, Demidov, first-round draft picks, Reinbacher, Kaiden Guhle. When you can get good, solid players deeper into the draft, and I call deeper into the draft after the second round, that is a boon to your franchise.
And Oliver Kapanen was drafted in round 264th overall in 2021. I think the thing that works against them, Craig, is the timing. Let me explain. Their goal is to be in the mix this season. He's a 21-year-old centerman who hasn't played a game in the National Hockey League yet. You usually need to add some veterans to a young crop of players. They're already very young with Suzuki, Caulfield, Doc, Slafkovsky. I mean, this core is anywhere between 19 to 24. You need to insulate it with some more veterans. Also, going to be tough to move a guy like Dvorak right now. And if you move a guy like Jake Evans, you won't get anything. I think Owen Beck will be a guy that will eventually replace Jake Evans on this team, I think, at one point. And let's just say Kapanen ends up replacing a Dvorak. I think you'll hold on to Dvorak. And I just think the timing is a little bit off. I could be wrong, but the fact they wanted me in the mix, I'm not so sure they're going to add a young player right now.
Yeah, I think your premise is one that I concur with. But at the same time, it's not that your timing is bad. It's just, what are you going to do to show that you can help the team? And, for Oliver right now, what you just point out, you point out Christian Dvorak, Jake Evans played in the third, fourth line center spots. But, if Oliver's here and he's going to play in Laval and he's going to develop his game and he's going to be available depending on what he shows in Laval, and you're going to, if you do run into injuries and you see that Oliver is continuing to progress in his game, well, that's nice to have. And if it doesn't happen this year, he's still in a place where he can take his game forward. And that's something that's significant for the Montreal Canadiens, because when you got to manage your salary cap too. And I'm not saying that Oliver now becomes a focal point on the salary cap, but in a year or 2 years, like, that becomes more of a focus. So to be able to develop them, you got to start that clock at some point in time on the entry-level contract so that you can have productive players, coming in on entry-level contracts or on bridge contracts that can really help your salary cap, not help your salary cap, so that you can manage your salary cap and remain competitive. And I think that that's a positive with Oliver Cap and with Owen Beck. And when you have two players, and Oliver and Owen, that are smart players, that are competitive players, like, they can go and develop together, because I don't think there's any question in my mind that they could be Montreal Canadiens in the future. Now, whether that future is this year or next year or 18 months from now, I do believe that they're going to be NHL players.
So speaking of NHL players, there's no doubt that what a great step and big step, huge step that Juraj Slafkovsky took in his second season in the National Hockey League at just age 19, 20 goals and 30 assists. The Athletic sees Slafkovsky, by the way, as one of the top 10 players to just kind of explode this season. That would be at an early age, right before the age of 20. But Eric Engels, Sportsnet, who was there earlier today, he tells us via X, formerly known as Twitter, that it was unanimous. And the best player that played in the intra-squad today was Juraj Slafkovsky.
Well, there's a surprise. You think about what he did from the last half of the season. I mean, his progression was significant. And it wasn't just what he was able to do as a player and be productive. You could just see him rise up with this tremendous amount of confidence and a real understanding of, I know as a first overall pick, you're going to get every opportunity. You're trying to be comfortable in the lineup when you first come in. But last year, especially down the stretch in the last 30, 35 games, there was no question that Juraj Slafkovsky says, I belong, I'm good enough, and I'm going to make an impact. So when Eric makes when everybody says it's unanimous about who the best player in the scrimmage is, it comes as no surprise to me, because Juraj Slafkovsky is wired, like it's in his DNA to just continue to get better, and all he has done is do exactly that.
Wow, it's pretty exciting the way he's just progressed so quickly. And you look, I don't think we've said it often enough where they get enough credit, but the Canadiens management team of Gordon and Hughes, and along with their head coach, Marty St. Louis, they made a decision to keep Juraj Slafkovsky up with the big team. And who knows what the development path would have been. Who knows how quickly it would have came along. Who knows what last season would have been, or maybe this season, if Juraj Slafkovsky would have been sent down to Laval. I mean, maybe they send him there and maybe he gets here. Maybe they send him there and it just crushes his confidence. Maybe they send him there and when he comes back, he's just never able to get going. But Kent Hughes gave an analogy when he was asked, I remember back in, why aren't you sending him to Laval? And he said, well, if I'm driving on the highway and I'm not used to the highway speed, but I get off the highway and all I'm ever going to do is just drive on the service road for the next year, am I going to be a better driver on the highway when I get back on? Isn't that something? The way you put it, though? Hey, isn't that something?
Yeah, it's a good analogy. And certainly, the competitive level, the pace of play at the National League, in the National Hockey League is significant, and players have to get up to that level. They have to get up to that level of competitiveness. They have to get up to the pace, and and Kent uses that analogy, I think, very appropriately. And I think it's also important to know. When I say important to know, it's important to know that you understand the player, understand where he's at, understand, where some of the growths, and remember, there's going to be times when you're kind of going through these bumps, these growth bumps, I call them, and how you help the player manage through that. One of the things that Marty St. Louis, it just speaks to his tremendous feel, and from my perspective, he put him on the power play, and people said, "Why are you putting Juraj Slafkovsky on the power play?" And he said, I want him to get some more puck touches. I want him to be able to have more confidence with the puck. Like, as a coach, when you're understanding that, like, he might not get as many touches at 5-on-5, and now to get him on the power play and get him a little bit more comfortable with the puck and being a little bit more confident, I think that's one aspect. And knowing the player, I think, is really, really important, because not every player can manage those bumps in the same way that Juraj Slafkovsky did last year. And I think that looking at it from an overall perspective, but then narrowing it down individually, I think that there's no question that Montreal made the right decision. And, and I'm one, and I'm very open about it. I'm one that says I believe that the vast majority of players need more time, not less. But there's exceptions to the rule. And, my preference is allowing players to be more in their element, but there's exceptions to the rule. And knowing what your player can handle, and I'm not talking about it's everything. It's the physical, it's the mental, it's the emotional. And I think that what Marty St. Louis has demonstrated, along with Jeff and Kent, is that they have a real feel for the person. And I think that's really important to development.
All right. So since it's the night of admissions, I'm one who thought that Juraj Slafkovsky should start in the National Hockey League, and he did, and I commend the Canadiens. I'm also one, though, when I saw him struggling, I said, okay, I'm not ready to send him to Laval just yet, but I will tell you this. I'm not going to send them just yet, because at one point he hadn't had an opportunity to play the first unit of the power play or to play with guys like Suzuki and Caulfield. And I said, please give him 10 games, not one game, where you could be nervous. Things might not go your way. You might not get the puck luck, whatever. give him 10 games, which is a real nice sample. It's enough time to kind of show that there's something, yes or no. Give him 10 games. And if the 10 games he's comfortable, then you can keep him up. And if the 10 games he's not comfortable, then you can send him back to Laval. And to their credit, they put him on the first unit of the power play, and they put him with Suzuki and Caulfield. So all that, we're on the same page. I'm pretty happy about that. Here's where I was wrong. And, well, I'm wrong so far. We'll see. I said at one point that based on what I've seen, and this is when Slafkovsky was struggling, that Logan Cooley will be the player that will have the better NHL career. And the reason he'll have the better NHL career is because he's a smarter player. He sees more of the ice. He's a more cerebral player. Now, you usually say that for centermen over wingers, and you say that a lot when it comes to smaller players because they've always had to exercise their brain much more than a bigger player. And the reason why I said it was because of those reasons. A centerman, playmaker, and because of a small player who got to exercise his brain. And I didn't think Juraj Slafkovsky would be a very smart hockey player. You could be a dominant hockey player, but not a very smart hockey player, because he relied on his size up until that point, and he never really had to exercise his brain. He is one of the smartest, big, young players I've seen in a while. Very smart for such a big man. Like when Eric Lindros came into the league and he was like really big, I don't find he played with a lot of IQ, and he got tagged a lot because Eric was just, he had a bad habit of looking down when he was stick handling the puck, but he could do it. Junior hockey, he was so much bigger and stronger than everyone else. He would just bowl over everybody, right? But when he got to the National Hockey League, the best league in the world, and guys know how to hit, there's very little time and space, and the game is going fast. He got tagged. I thought that was going to happen a lot to Slafkovsky. It happened in year one. And then in that offseason, he put on these virtual cameras and started seeing images come to him a lot faster, and started like almost reprogramming the way he thought and his court, and I don't think he got tagged once last year.
Yeah, well, and that's becoming comfortable. And that goes to where, Kent Hughes talks about the service road versus, the highway. So Dave Poulin, who was doing a lot of the Montreal Canadiens broadcast before joining the Ottawa Senators, and specifically in Uri's first year, talked about Uri getting himself into spots that he didn't understand that you were vulnerable. That's part of learning too. Like, because just as you pointed out, Tony, you can go into those spots at the lower levels without really any, what I would call risk of harm. And you get to the NHL and the harm's a lot greater. Players are closing on you, as you just point out. But certainly watching Uri develop and watching him push his game further, and the drive he has to push his game further and to be as good as he possibly can be is really significant. And, you think about it, 50 points last year, 50 points. And we're talking about a player that we think we can explode. I mean, if he can get to 65 points, I think that as a 20-year-old player in the last year of his entry-level contract, I think that's massively significant. But at the end of it all, Juraj Slafkovsky, and we're going to circle right back to where we started about Marty St. Louis, the mantra, Juraj Slafkovsky becomes the first overall pick because he possesses these wonderful physical tools, wonderful hockey skills, and then he's got to work to get them in place, and understanding how he can connect that to the team and now impact the team in such a positive manner. I think there's every reason for everybody to be excited about where Juraj Slafkovsky's game can go.
The Sick Podcast is brought to you in part by Bittt Tibi. They launched a new Ultra Lager. It's a refreshing, thirst-quenching beer, perfect for the hot summer days. Only 90 calories, only 2 grams of carbs, only 4% ABV per can, available in a pack of 6 and 12 in grocery stores all around the province of Quebec. It's ultra light and it's ultra refreshing. I think one of the most incredible Montreal Canadiens stats in the last little while, Craig, has to be the two in the history of the Montreal Canadiens had a season of 20 plus goals and 30 plus assists under the age of 20. 2. Juraj Slafkovsky is 1, and the late Guy Lafleur is the other. That's a pretty good company to be in the company of the Flower, let me tell you.
Hey, yes, anytime you're in the company of Flower, when we're talking about accomplishments, I mean, you put a big smile on your face, and you realize, wow, that's pretty heady stuff.
Man, I miss that guy. Hey, speaking of Flower, obviously, his first coach, Scotty Bowman. I have something for you here. I had Pierre Maguire on a couple of nights ago on the Sick Podcast. I'm going to make you laugh. So I shared a story with Pierre. A couple of days ago, I called Scotty Bowman. And this was on Tuesday. And I called him on Tuesday, and I said, hi, Scotty. Tony Marinaro. He said, hi, how are you? I said, very good, thank you. I said, I'd love if you can do me the honor of coming on my radio show on BPM Sports, and these are some of the topics. And he said, when would you like to do that? And I said, tomorrow, which was yesterday, Wednesday. And he said, oh, unfortunately, tomorrow I can't do it. I got a busy day. It's my birthday. And so he says, I have some things planned. And I said, oh, okay, happy birthday to you. And anyway, we convened to talk again next week. So I got Pierre on, and I say, hey, Pierre, Scotty's going to be celebrating his 91st birthday on Wednesday. And Pierre looks at me, and like, this is like his most serious look in the world he's ever given me, right? And he's like, like Scotty can still coach in the National Hockey League. And I look at him, and I'm like, I don't want to say anything. I mean, Pierre would know. Pierre worked with him, but I mean, for me, it defies the laws of physics, right? He's 91 years old, right? And Pierre says, look, let me make this clear. I mean, Scotty cannot go on the ice, and Scotty, an 82 game season is way, way too long. But if you would just take him and just put him behind the bench during an NHL game, and for X amount of games, he can definitely do it. And then I said, yeah. And he says, oh, I'll take it a step further. He says, if I have a 7th game tonight, any coach in the National Hockey League, I'll put Scotty Bowman to win that hockey game against that coach. I was like, wow. That's something.
We're talking about one of the greatest coaches in any sport, anywhere in the world, period. I mean, he is. I mean, who are you going to put him in with? Red Auerbach, John Wooden, Bill Belichick, Scotty Bowman. I mean, the group that he's in with is a very small group. 9
Stanley Cups, 5 with the Canadiens, 3 with Detroit Red Wings, 1 with the Pittsburgh Penguins as a coach. Not to mention, I believe 3 as a senior advisor with the Chicago Blackhawks, right? And 1 with the Pittsburgh Penguins with Badger Bob Johnson in 91.
I think he had 1 with Detroit too in 08.
I mean,
so I think he had 3 with the Blackhawks, 1 with the Red Wings, and 1 with the Penguins. So he's got 9 as a head coach and 5 as an executive. So much is made of Scotty Bowman, and there's so many different aspects to Scotty's brilliance. But one of the things, and you've heard it, growing up in Montreal, and you've heard different commentary about Scotty and his approach to coaching and his mannerisms, and sometimes the way people would say, oh yeah, the way he coached and treat. I'm going to preface this. He coached for 5 decades, and in all those 5 decades, he had success. Let's be very clear there as a coach. But I think that not enough is said about Scotty Bowman, the person. And I go to 2 significant scenarios where there is no way you cannot be a high-end quality person with great empathy. You can't get through these 2 scenarios if you don't have it. And Scotty, we know how brilliant he was behind the bench. He took over for one of the most popular people on the planet in Bob Johnson after his tragic diagnosis with brain cancer and ultimately passing away. Scotty had to go in and take over that team. And there's no way you can go into that situation without empathy and understanding. I mean, the players, everybody in the organization is trying to deal with the loss of Bob Johnson, Scotty included. and he goes in there and leads them to the Stanley Cup in 1992. But he did it again. In 1997, he delivered the first Stanley Cup to the Detroit Red Wings in a long time. And we know what happened in that very sad accident that took the career of Vladimir Konstantinov away. And what did Scotty do the next year? Oh, yeah, he led the team to the Stanley Cup. There's no way as a human, if you don't have empathy and you don't have understanding of people and their feelings and what people are going through, it's great to have all the X's and the O's, and Scotty has them as better than anybody. But I don't think enough is said about Scotty Bowman, the person.
So well said. Let's finish off with Demidov, 2 goals, 2 assists earlier today in a SKA win over Sochi. Obviously, it's 6 points in 6 games in the KHL. He's in pretty elite company, which is pretty cool at such a young age. But I think you know a thing or two about Sochi, right? They're not the Soviet Union. They're not Russia. They're not the USSR. They're not Russia of the Summit Series. They're not the Soviets of the 1987 Canada Cup, are they?
Well, they're not the Red Army of 1975 that came into the Forum and
3-3 tie.
Yeah, you know it, right? But that's okay. One of the things I hear often, they go, "Oh yeah, the level of play." Well, why didn't everybody have 4 points then against Sochi? Like, if it's so easy to do, why doesn't everybody get 4 points against Sochi? You got to go out on the ice and you got to find a way to be productive. And listen, Demidov is a highly skilled player. He's a highly determined, competitive player. He's had games, including his last one, I think it was his last one. He could have had 4 points in that game. He was brilliant. We measure success a lot of times by how many goals, how many points, and it's significant. When you're a point producer, you got to produce. I get that, but Demidov he's high end, and I just see.
Yeah, a lot of Canadiens fans are upset. They feel like Michkov is the one who got away the year before when they had a chance to draft him at 5. Ultimately, they drafted David Reinbacher, and Michkov ended up going 7 to the Philadelphia Flyers. 1 year later, the Canadiens end up with the 5th pick, and they draft Demidov with their 5th pick. So I'm going to put you on the spot. I know you're going to tell me they're different players, and I get that. Michkov or Demidov, and why?
Well, I said this last year heading into the draft. I thought Demidov was a better prospect at the same stage than Michkov. And I think Michkov's a real, I think he's a top-notch prospect. But I thought Demidov, last year I said it, I'm on record as saying, I think Demidov is a better prospect at the same age than Michkov. There's been, and that is not to take away anything from Matvei Michkov. He's a very, very talented player. But you're going to have players that are better than you. And I'm not saying it's a wide gap between them, but I think Demidov is at the same stage of their draft years, a better prospect.
So without putting words in your mouth, would you be willing to say that if you had to put $1 or $2 on one to have a better NHL career, that based on your opinion of them at the same age, that you'd probably put it on Demidov?
Okay, so let me ask you this. I'm going to throw you, I don't know if it's a curveball, but I'm going to throw you, maybe I'll throw you one of those big Bill Lee floaters, you just float it over the plate. We just talked about Guy Lafleur. Did Marcel Dion have that much of a lesser career than Guy Lafleur?
He actually had more points than Guy Lafleur.
He did. And I'm just saying they went 1-2. When you're trying to build out your team, so much of the time, and these are great debates. They're great debates. You sit around, talking about it, going back and forth, who's better, who's going to be better. I've said, I think Michkov is a really gifted, talented player. But, you have to put a stake in the ground. I was asked today on Bob McKenzie's draft show, his preseason draft ranking, who would have the better long-term career in the NHL, Connor Bedard or Gavin McKenna? And I said, geez, it's a photo finish, but I'm giving the slight edge right now to Connor Bedard. So I think the slight edge goes to Demidov, but it's not a wide gap here.
Yeah. Dion would have been a good pick, but Lafleur, I think, was just born to be a Montreal Canadian. Thanks so much, Craig. Always amazing stuff. Talk to you soon, my man. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
All right. The Sick Podcast, once again, was brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group, a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America. They are driven to be different. Special thanks to all of you for watching. Comment SICK, S-I-C-K. If you liked it, share it with your friends. Follow us on YouTube if you haven't already. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple. It's our way of feeling the love. We'll be back tomorrow night, same time, same place. Matt O'Hain will be in for that one. It's a Sick Podcast. I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. Bittt. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.